My wife called me a failure in front of our friends during dinner. A stranger at the table said, "Then why is he the only one paying?" She went silent for minutes, then left the room. We were halfway through dinner at a trendy place in Stamford, surrounded by her work friends, when Serena leaned in with a casual smirk and said, "Well, Neil's never really been ambitious. He's always just played it safe." Someone chuckled, another sipped wine awkwardly. Then she added with a laugh, "Stable, yes. But you could also say boring. Not much of a risk taker." The table went quiet for a second too long. And then, a woman I didn't even know someone's +1 glanced at me, then looked at Serena and said calmly, "Then why is he the only one paying?" Serena's face dropped. She stared at her plate, got up, and left the room without a word. Let me rewind and give the full story, because I honestly don't know what to do from here, or if this is just the beginning of something worse. I'm Neil. I'm 47 years old. I work in IT infrastructure consulting, mostly remote, nothing flashy. It pays well enough, and I'm decent at it. I've worked hard for years, provided for my family, saved where I could, and tried to be a good father and husband. My wife, Serena, is 45, and she works in interior design. She's always been more socially driven, the type who curates friend groups like portfolios. She thrives on appearances and atmosphere, whereas I'm more about consistency and loyalty. We've been married for 21 years. 2 kids. Milo is 16, Ava is 14. Both good, grounded kids. They mean everything to me. Our relationship, to anyone watching from the outside, looked fine, functional, even content. But somewhere in the last few years, I started to feel invisible. It wasn't one big blow up, more like a long fade. The kind of marriage where she talks to you, but not with you. Where you exist in the same room, but feel like pieces of different puzzles. I'd come home and hear her on the phone with clients, her voice animated and enthusiastic. Then she'd hang up and barely glance up at me. I chalked it up to stress, to life. I didn't want to rock the boat. I thought being dependable mattered more than being noticed. But it was more than that. Serena slowly began to resent what I wasn't. I wasn't flashy, I didn't chase career titles, I didn't jump from job to job trying to make it big. I valued stability. But over time, I realized she interpreted my steadiness as lack of ambition. My consistency was, to her, evidence of being stuck. She started dropping comments. Light jabs at first, veiled jokes when friends were over, like calling me Mr. Reliable with an eye roll, or telling the kids, "Ask your dad, he always knows the safe answer." I let it slide. For years. Because I loved her. And because I thought maybe she was just frustrated with her own path and projecting. But those comments chipped away at something. When she planned this dinner, I didn't want to go. She said it was with old friends from a design firm she worked at in Manhattan early in her career. People she hadn't seen in years. It was important to her, so I agreed. She picked the restaurant Bar Rosso, one of those upscale, mood lighting, exposed brick types with small plates that cost more than full meals. She invited 8 people. I recognized 2 from previous events. The others were new to me, plus a couple of their spouses or partners. Everyone looked the same, stylish, curated, confident. We ordered wine. The conversation buzzed around me about real estate trends, client budgets, some Instagram influencer who copied someone's designs. I felt like a coat rack with a glass in my hand. Still, I smiled, listened, chimed in when appropriate. When the waiter came around, I quietly handed him my card. I've always done that at her events. She liked it that way, for everything to look seamless. She never asked, but I knew what it meant to her, so I paid. Then someone brought up career changes. A woman across the table, Chelsea, mentioned leaving corporate to freelance and asked if anyone else had made big leaps lately. That's when Serena laughed. She leaned in, made eye contact with Chelsea, and said, "Well, Neil's never been a leap kind of guy. He's always preferred stability. Never quite the big dreamer, you know." A few people chuckled politely. I did too. Nervous habit. But she didn't stop. She turned back to the table and said, "He's safe. Very safe. It's sweet. Or boring, depending on how you look at it." Something shifted. The kind of silence that makes forks pause midair. I didn't say anything. I just felt the air pressing around me. My chest tightened. I looked at her, hoping for some kind of wink, some gesture that said it was a joke. Nothing. Just a sip of wine and a smirk. Then, and I'll never forget this, a woman across the table, someone I hadn't even noticed much until then, maybe in her 50s, poised, silver streaks in her hair, looked directly at Serena and asked, "Then why is he the only one paying?" She didn't say it with malice. Just calm. Curious, like she truly wanted to understand. Serena blinked. Froze. Her mouth opened like she wanted to laugh it off, but nothing came out. Her hand trembled slightly as she put the wine glass down. She stood up, slowly, took her purse, and walked out of the dining room without saying a word. For a moment, no one moved. You could hear the waiter at the next table setting down silverware. Then someone cleared their throat, and a few people awkwardly excused themselves. The stranger, Beth, as I later learned, looked at me, gave a small nod, and went back to sipping her water. And that's how it all cracked open. I didn't follow Serena. I sat there, feeling every inch of the last 21 years roll over me like a slow wave. All the overlooked sacrifices, the birthdays I worked through, the vacations I budgeted for but never chose, the nights I picked up the pieces so she could pursue her passion. And yet, in her eyes, I was bored. A failure. Not enough. I paid the bill. Tipped well. Walked out into the cool Connecticut air feeling more hollow than I had in years. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove around for 2 hours, parked at the Cove Beach lot, and just sat in the car watching the waves. And for the first time in 2 decades, I didn't feel guilty about not checking in. I went back home around 2 a.m. The house was dark, quiet. Serena was asleep in our bedroom, or at least pretending to be, the door shut, light off. I didn't try to talk to her. I grabbed a blanket, went to the couch, and stared at the ceiling until the morning sun filtered in through the windows. The next day was still. We didn't speak much. I made coffee. She was already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table on her laptop. She didn't say good morning. I didn't ask if she was okay. We moved around each other like strangers in a shared space. Milo came downstairs first, asking if we were still going to the driving range like I promised. I said yes. Serena didn't look up. Ava followed, headphones around her neck, hair in a messy ponytail. She sensed something was off. She's always been the more perceptive of the two. She scanned the room quietly, sat down, and started scrolling on her phone. Breakfast passed with barely any conversation. That has become normal lately. Later that afternoon, when the kids were out with friends, Serena and I finally spoke. Or, rather, she spoke. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," she said from across the room, not looking up from her phone. I didn't answer right away. I was folding laundry in the living room, my back half turned toward her. "You did," I said, softly but clear. She sighed like I was being dramatic. It was a joke. I was just trying to keep the conversation light. People talk like that all the time. I stopped folding, looked over at her. "Do you talk about me like that all the time?" She finally looked at me then, for the first time that day. "What is that supposed to mean? You made me sound like I'm dragging you down. Like you've had to settle for someone lesser. Do you even believe that?" Her mouth tightened. She looked down at her hands. "I don't know what I believe anymore, Neil. I just know I used to think we'd be doing more than this by now." More than this. Those words settled in my stomach like lead. This wasn't new. She'd hinted at it for years in more subtle ways, suggesting I take bigger roles, apply for high-paying contracts with travel requirements, even hinted I should think about starting a business, like other guys our age. But I didn't want that. I like being present. I like showing up to Milo's games and helping Ava with school projects. I didn't want to be the guy with a corner office and a Bluetooth headset glued to his ear while his kids learned to live without him. I wanted to say that. But I knew she'd already turned me out. And worse, I suspected she'd already decided I was the wrong kind of man for the life she pictured for herself. That week passed in strange, quiet tension. She didn't apologize again. I didn't ask for one. We existed in proximity, each of us avoiding the real conversation. I tried to focus on work. She went out twice with friends. She didn't tell me who was going. I didn't ask. Then came Sunday. Family dinner night. The one consistent tradition we tried to keep even through fights, stress, work chaos, all of it. We always cooked at home, the four of us. Usually something simple like roasted chicken, salad, and Serena's favorite red wine. This time it felt off. Ava helped me in the kitchen while Serena worked on setting the table. Milo was upstairs FaceTiming someone. The house felt quiet in a heavy way. As we sat down, I noticed Serena's energy was dialed down, quieter than usual. She looked tired, like something had shifted in her too. I wondered if she was feeling embarrassed, or maybe just exposed. About halfway through dinner, Ava looked up and asked, "What happened at your dinner thing, Mom? You left early." Serena froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Milo looked up too. She hesitated. "I wasn't feeling well," she said quickly. "Something I ate, I think." I didn't say anything. Neither did the kids. But the air changed. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat in the backyard for a long time with a drink in my hand, trying to figure out where to go from here. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Just sad. Tired. Disconnected from someone I used to feel everything with. I haven't slept in the guest room yet. But I stayed up on the couch again. And I noticed she didn't come looking for me either. That said more than anything she could have said out loud. A few days later, I got a message. Not from Serena. From Beth. The woman from the dinner. The one who'd called Serena out. Her message was polite. Respectful. She said she hoped she hadn't overstepped, but wanted to say she was sorry I had to go through that. Said she'd recognized something familiar in how Serena spoke to me. And that she'd once been married to a man who was treated the same way. She wasn't pushy. She didn't ask for anything. She just saw me. I sat with that message for a while. Read it again. Then again. I didn't reply immediately. I wasn't sure I could. Not because I felt anything romantic, but because the simple act of being acknowledged by a complete stranger felt more real than anything Serena had said to me in months. That feeling sat with me like a quiet reminder. And that's where things stood. My marriage was no longer a partnership. It was a stage performance where I played the background role. My kids were starting to sense it. My silence had become complicated, and I was no longer sure I wanted to play along. I didn't reply to Beth for a couple of days. I kept rereading her message, though. Not because it was anything dramatic, it wasn't. In fact, it was the simplicity that hit me hardest. She wrote, "I hope I didn't overstep the other night. I've been in your position. Sometimes the quiet ones are carrying the most weight. I just wanted to say you didn't deserve that. I saw it, and I hope you see it too." She didn't need anything from me. No response, no explanation. Just a quiet kindness I hadn't felt in a long time. The contrast between that message and my day-to-day with Serena was glaring. My wife hadn't even mentioned the dinner since the night it happened. Not once. No apology, no reflection, not even an attempt to explain herself. It was as though it didn't matter to her at all. Or worse, that I didn't matter enough for it to be worth addressing. A few nights later, I replied. Short and polite. "You didn't overstep. Thank you for your kindness. It meant a lot." That was it. I left it there. I didn't expect her to write back, and I didn't necessarily want to open anything further. But it felt right to acknowledge it. She replied the next day. Light, friendly tone. "Wish me well." That was all. And somehow, even that basic exchange felt more human than most of the conversations I'd had in my marriage in the last year. The distance between Serena and me grew fast after that. She started spending more nights out, always with a vague, catching up with a friend excuse. She was rarely home before 10 p.m., and when she was, she'd head straight to the bedroom with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. I wasn't tracking her. I didn't feel jealous, oddly enough. Just numb. Like I'd already been written out of the story she was writing for herself, and she just hadn't told me yet. What hurt more was what the kids were starting to pick up on. Ava asked me one night while we were doing dishes, "Are you and Mom okay?" I paused, wiped my hands on a towel. "What makes you ask?" She shrugged. "You don't talk anymore. You used to joke around. Now you're just quiet. And she's different." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to put adult problems on her shoulders, but I also didn't want to lie. "We're figuring some things out," I said finally. "But no matter what, we both love you and Milo. That doesn't change." She nodded, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew more than she let on. One night, after Serena came home later than usual, I was still up not waiting for her, just stuck in a loop of thoughts. She dropped her purse on the counter and sighed. "You're still up?" I looked at her. "Yeah." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You want to say something, Neil?" I closed my laptop. Took a breath. "Do you?" I asked. "Because I've been waiting for weeks now for you to talk to me about that dinner. About how you humiliated me in front of strangers. And you've said nothing." Her face stiffened. I said it was a joke. It wasn't. She exhaled sharply, like she didn't want to go through this. "I'm tired, Neil. I really don't have the energy for this tonight." That sentence right there. That was the moment something final clicked into place for me. Not because we were arguing. We'd argued before. But because she wasn't even pretending to care anymore. She didn't see the conversation as a chance to reconnect or repair. She saw it as an inconvenience. "I'm tired too," I said. "But the difference is, I still care enough to show up for this marriage." She didn't reply. She picked up her purse and walked past me into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I don't think she realized the weight of that moment. But I did. Because that was when I started planning my exit. Not out of spite. Not to punish her. But because I had nothing left to give someone who saw me as a placeholder for a better version of a man she wished she'd married. I started looking at apartments. Quietly. Just to see what was available. I met with a divorce attorney in Stanford just to understand my options. I wasn't rushing anything, but I needed clarity. Meanwhile, I started showing up more intentionally for the kids. Milo and I started going on early morning drives to get him more hours behind the wheel for his permit. We talked about music, college, nothing heavy. But he opened up more on those drives than he had in months. Ava and I started baking together. She was into cooking videos now, trying new things every week. I encouraged it. Bought the ingredients. Stood by her as she learned to mess up and try again. And little by little, I started feeling like myself again. One Saturday afternoon, Serena mentioned she'd be gone overnight for a girls' spa trip with a couple of her friends. I nodded, said okay. Didn't ask questions. After she left, Milo came into the room while I was watching a game on TV. "You and Mom are going to split up?" he asked flatly. I looked over at him. He didn't sound angry. Just resigned. Like he already knew. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But we're not doing great." He nodded slowly. "It's okay if you do. I think Ava and I kind of expected at this point." That hit me like a punch to the chest, not because it was harsh, but because it was true. And he said it without fear or sadness. Just honesty. I realized then that staying in this marriage for the sake of appearances was helping no one. Least of all the kids. There's more. A lot more. And I'll share it if folks are interested. But this is where the shift happened, the quiet unraveling after years of building a life together. The slow realization that love isn't just about staying. It's about being seen, respected, valued. And when that disappears, even if it disappears quietly, it leaves a hole that pretending won't fill. The day after Serena got back from her spa trip, something in her felt different. Not relaxed or refreshed the way you'd expect someone to be after a getaway, but guarded. She was polite, measured, not cold, but definitely distant. Like she'd prepared herself for something and now wasn't sure whether to say it out loud. She came into the kitchen that morning while I was pouring coffee. Ava was still asleep. Milo was at a friend's house. "I've been thinking," she said. Her voice wasn't soft or emotional. It was businesslike, almost rehearsed. I turned toward her. "Yeah." She hesitated, then continued. "Maybe we should take some space. Not necessarily separate. Just some time." I looked at her for a long second. "Space," I repeated, like I was tasting the word. She nodded. "We've both been unhappy. I think it would help to have some room to figure things out." I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded. Not because I agreed with her reasoning. I think we both knew space wasn't going to fix this, but because I was already ahead of her. I had already found a furnished short-term rental in Norwalk, 15 minutes away. Nothing fancy. One bedroom. Quiet street. I'd planned to move into it after a real conversation with her. Now, she was handing me the segue without even realizing it. So I said, "Okay, let's take space." No yelling. No accusations. Just a quiet moment that felt like the slow pulling apart of Velcro, soft at first, then tearing as it reached the edges. I told the kids that evening. We sat in the living room. Serena stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She didn't speak. She let me handle it. I told them the truth, that their mom and I were going to take some time apart, that I'd be moving to a place nearby, that nothing between them and either of us would change, that they could call or visit whenever they wanted, and that I wasn't leaving them, just the house, for now. Ava cried quietly. Milo looked down at his hands. "I kind of knew," Ava whispered. Milo just nodded. No questions. No panic. Just quiet acceptance, which made it harder. Later that night, Ava came into my room while I was packing. "Can I come visit you next weekend?" she asked. I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Anytime." I moved out 3 days later. The apartment was small, but clean, quiet. I sat on the couch that first night, surrounded by unopened boxes and silence. It should have felt lonely. It didn't. It felt clear. The first weekend, the kids came over. We cooked frozen pizza, watched an old comedy I loved from college. They stayed up late. Ava fell asleep on the couch with her head on my shoulder. Milo played video games and ordered ice cream delivery without asking. It felt normal. Better than normal, honestly. It felt honest. Serena texted the next morning. "Hope they weren't too much work. Let me know when you're bringing them back." That was it. I stared at the message longer than I should have. It wasn't cruel, but it was cold. Detached. Like we were exchanging shifts at a job neither of us wanted anymore. I started seeing a therapist. I didn't go because I was falling apart. I went because I realized I had let myself shrink for too long. I wanted to understand why. Why do I let myself be minimized? Why I equated being quiet and dependable with being invisible? Why I stayed in a relationship where I hadn't felt respected for years? In our third session, my therapist asked, "When was the last time you felt your opinion mattered in your marriage?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I couldn't remember. Beth messaged me again a few weeks later. Simple check-in. Just, "Hope you're doing okay." No pressure to respond. Just thinking of you. I wrote back this time. We exchanged a few messages. She asked about the kids. Told me about a writing class she was teaching part-time in Westport. Nothing heavy. Nothing inappropriate. Eventually, we got coffee. In public. In daylight. We talked for an hour. She never brought up Serena. She just listened. Asked thoughtful questions. She didn't try to fix anything. She just heard me. That, in itself, felt rare. I told her I wasn't ready for anything complicated. She smiled and said, "That's good. Because I'm not offering anything complicated." It was the first time in a long time that I had a conversation with a woman where I didn't feel like I was auditioning to be someone better. I could just be me. Meanwhile, Serena and I barely spoke beyond logistics. She had slipped fully into her own orbit, gallery openings, design events, yoga retreats. Her social media suddenly showed more filtered photos, more friends, more curated captions about growth and alignment. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she initiate a serious conversation about us. Then, about 6 weeks after I moved out, she emailed me. Not a text, not a call, an email. Subject line, "Next steps." In the body, she wrote, "Hey, wanted to check in and see where your head is at. Maybe we should meet up soon and talk about longer-term plans. Let me know when it works." It was all business. No emotion. Just a proposal for a meeting, like we were colleagues planning a quarterly review. I stared at that email, reread it 3 times, and realized something important. She was done too. She just didn't want to say the words first. And that was the moment I understood we weren't breaking down anymore. We were already broken. And now, we were just negotiating what the pieces would look like. I didn't reply to Serena's email right away. Not because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but because I needed a few more days to fully accept what that email meant. that she had already closed the book and was now looking to sort the paperwork. There was no sadness in her message, no warmth, no curiosity about me, the man she'd shared 21 years, 2 kids, and a lifetime of memories with. Just an impersonal nudge toward the exit. Like she wanted to wrap things up before summer, maybe squeeze in a few carefree vacations without the weight of a fading marriage dragging her down. So I gave myself time. Time to think. To meet with my lawyer again. To review my finances. To get clear about what next steps would look like for me, not for her. The following weekend, I picked up the kids. We had dinner at the apartment again, and I told them gently that I'd spoken to a lawyer, that we were likely heading toward divorce. I told them it wouldn't be ugly, that I'd never speak badly about their mother, and I'd never ask them to choose sides. Milo nodded. Ava cried again. And then Milo, my quiet, analytical boy, looked at me and asked, "So what happens now?" I smiled. Now? Now we start living honestly. The meeting with Serena was exactly what I expected. Cold, efficient, transactional. We met at a neutral coffee shop. She wore a sleek navy blazer, hair pulled back, looking more like she was prepping for a client pitch than discussing the end of a marriage. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal she'd already drafted with her attorney. She wanted to keep the house, split the accounts equally, and proposed 50-50 custody, though she added she was open to the kids spending more time with me if they preferred. I read the whole thing without reacting. Then I pulled out my own folder. My lawyer had been thorough. Serena blinked when she saw it. She hadn't expected me to come prepared. "I'm not contesting the house," I said calmly. "You can keep it, but I want joint custody, and I want to keep the retirement accounts intact. I've put more into them over the years, and I don't think it's fair to split them straight down the middle." She frowned. "That's not how this usually goes." "No," I said. "But this hasn't been a usual marriage, has it?" She didn't respond. She glanced through the papers. I could see the realization dawning that I wasn't the passive, agreeable husband she'd gotten used to. "Not anymore. I'll have to review this with my lawyer," she said finally. "Of course," I replied. I stood to leave, paused, and then added, "By the way, I spoke to the kids. They're going to stay with me full-time until the school year ends. They said it makes things easier, and honestly, I agree." Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles tightened around the folder. And that was the first win. Now here's where it gets satisfying. Serena's image had always been her currency, how she presented herself, how others viewed her life. Her friends, her clients, her online presence, it was all meticulously curated. And for years, I had played my part as the quiet, stable husband in the background. But once the news of our separation began to circulate mostly through our kids' school network, mutual friends, and her own oversharing cracks began to show. People started asking questions. Why did we split? Was there someone else? Was it mutual? She tried to spin it and told people we had grown apart, that I wanted different things. But it didn't take long for the truth to slip out in fragments. One of her friends told me, quietly and with some guilt, that Serena had confided in a few people that she felt held back by me, that I wasn't evolving, that she'd sacrificed her prime years for stability, and now she was ready for more. But life has a way of serving its own poetic justice. A month after we filed, Serena's dream client, a well-known luxury development firm in New York, dropped her without explanation. She'd been courting them for over a year. They were her ticket to leveling up in the design world. But apparently, word had spread. Someone, maybe one of her friends, or someone from that dinner, had mentioned how she'd spoken about her husband in front of a group. And the firm, known for its values-driven branding, didn't want someone associated with public disrespect. When she called me, not texted to ask if I'd heard anything, I simply said, "No, I haven't. But I hope you're okay." She paused. "You sound different." "I am," I said. "I just stopped trying to earn love from someone who was already gone." She didn't reply. And Beth? We kept things light for a while. Friendly coffees. Walks at Cove Island Park. She never pushed. She had her own life, her own independence. But she was there. Consistently. And after everything, that mattered more than anything. 6 months later, after the divorce was finalized, I invited her to dinner. Real dinner. A proper date. She wore a navy dress, simple, elegant, and somehow more genuine than anything Serena had ever performed for. She didn't talk over me. She didn't make jokes at my expense. She didn't make me feel like a placeholder for someone better. We talked for hours, laughed, sat in silence without awkwardness. When the check came, I reached for it. She smiled and gently pushed my hand away. "I got this one," she said. "You've done enough heavy lifting." It wasn't revenge. Not really. But sitting across from a woman who saw me, after 21 years of being overlooked? Yeah, that was satisfying.